I'm reminded of my first official marriage, which lasted 18 years, and we had a son. Do you know, my views don't seem to have changed very much. Except to say I assumed that the goodness of marriage and caring for children and so on, and helping society and bringing about a better world, was right to be my prime goal. I hadn't much experience, you see, at that point. I was totally new to, as it happens, Christianity. Although, more from my understanding, the story of Jesus, as interpreted, as seen by Paramahansa Yogananda in his autobiography specifically, a very Eastern view. And of course the Christian would throw up their hands in horror at such and write me off immediately, from a doctrinal point of view, of course. Of course. I mean, it's quite reasonable, really. Why then did I hang into the Christian religion even so? Because it was more extant, the most available around, and as I understood it, pursuing godliness. I mean, I wasn't Hindu any more than I was Christian. I wasn't looking for a guru, but I was already friendly towards the notion of the story of Jesus. A good man who's helping people and is appallingly mistreated. And as I understood it, very misunderstood by the world. And of course, increasingly I found very misunderstood by the Christian church. I mean, the minister who was marrying us was unquestionably persecuted by his diaconate. Well, I was just appalled. Well, in fact, I was just using my experienced secular mind, simply saying, well, this confirms, I was right in my view, but that doesn't mean to say I'm throwing out spiritual things. Because I've read, Paramahansa's autobiography, and I still hope there is a spiritual way, a valid interpretation of Christianity, say, or of the Bible. Perhaps even a harmony between the different religions of the world that are so important to their respective peoples. That God would be rather greater than Christianity. Do you see? In relation to the last recording, I noticed before I put the S numbering onto it, it's come up as voice 24, the recording I've just done prior to this. And 24 is that combination of numbers that was everywhere when my first wife and I met and married, and God just worked amazing miracles of provision, housing, harmony with people. The support of this minister retiring and his wife, elderly couple. Everything just came together in an absolutely wonderful way. And we were aware of it. And we were aware of, 24 and 42 cropping up all over the place. Don't know what others think of the significance of those two numbers together. For some obscure reason, I've never really looked for that number as itself. 4 and 2 together come to 6, which is meant to be the number of man. I suppose because he was made on the 6th day, was he, officially in the Old Testament, Genesis. But I think that may be wider than a Christian numerology of things, Maybe, yeah. But to the point here is at the start. No, we don't put marriage and children before God. I don't know if this is a gender thing. It's as if women can't help but put children before God. You could say, well, God and children are perfectly consistent and therefore there's no problem. But I felt that about marriage too. I found it not to be true. May I say from my very narrow view that my devotion to marriage didn't necessarily imply that plural partners, would be also devoted. And it does take two to make a marriage. So like it or not, I've been dragged through 3 divorces. And I wouldn't say I'm happier now than I've ever been, because when in love, and the marriages for the bulk of their time were extremely good. I mean, I was married for 18 years and then 18 years again and then another 7, with absolutely lovely times in that, in large measure. But in this world, all things pass. And if it's not through something like divorce, a marriage can end through death. Someone dies. Although you may feel spiritually you're still very much one with your deceased now partner. Especially if you believe they're in heaven waiting for you, of course. Which many do. Most earnestly believe, hope and trust such. I think there's conceivably an advantage to the male gender in that he does get possibly experience of continuing to put the wife first when the wife doesn't necessarily put him first. And I think we almost feel that she is right to do what she does and he's right to do what he does. He starts to take a back seat. He's still providing, protecting, and loving the wife, flat out. More so, really, because he's lost much of her attention. And that's not the end of the world for him. If she's happy and appreciates that he's making her devotion to her children all the more possible by his love. And he can run with that. How lovely. You could say he's practicing a selflessness in this regard. And she too is shifting her selflessness from loving him, putting him first anyway. I mean, she doesn't love him, but to putting children first. She's still selfless towards the kids, which is why she can be so fierce at times. For the female of the species is more deadly than the male in protecting her young. And in a way, that's quite wonderful, isn't it? But individual families and priority of own children and male-female gender aspects of living are aspects of this world. They are not in the kingdom of heaven. I hold an extreme view, perhaps, that eternity is not just into the future, but into the past. And that a perfection is an ultimate perfection of all past, present, and future. I can't pretend to understand how this can be so, but I view it as we were already in heaven and we came to earth to sort some things out that in some sense anchors our eternity in eternity. And we go through a stage of not knowing here and uncertainty in this universe, that we may sort out certain underlying values, if you like, in our personhood that can only be sorted out in this minimalistic living way compared to heaven. And we call this diminution of understanding and powers and lifespan. I mean, a mere 70 years, say. We call it childhood from an eternal point of view, from a kingdom of heaven point of view. Because we can best understand that given our experience of childhood here before we became adults in our society, here in this world. So I'm not pretending to understand, but to conceptualize as a working theory, hypothesis, if you like, until a better one comes to me, more enlightenment, so to speak, or us in general, mankind, as to the meaning of life. And it's a view, of course, that very much embraces a view of God. And in particular, an individualistic view. I'm not downing individuality. I think our uniqueness can be perfected in the sense of become harmonious with God without being identical to. In other words, we can become wonderful adults as God is in eternity by His grace and goodness and love of us. That's my hope. It might become yours, it might not. Bless you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.